There we go. We're recording.
There we go. It's official.
Yeah, welcome everybody to the Abnormal Podcast, where CDAT and Bloodhound, after a very long time, are doing something again.
Yeah, it's since we're teenagers.
Yeah, it's the ultimate yap time because that's all that I do is spam text you about things anyway when I'm watching stuff.
It, it's great because like it gives us a chance to actually talk. 'Cause like half the times, I got the kids and everything. So this is like awesome that we get to sit down and do this.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we're just gonna be yapping about random stuff. I wanted to start off with the boys because obviously that is a hot topic right now. The last episode is about to come out in a couple of days, um, and I'm very disappointed with the way that the show has gone since season three. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, so obviously we've had this discussion quite a few times just because obviously like you said it is the hot topic right now. But like like I was telling you, like this last episode's gonna have to deliver on so many different levels that obviously I don't think it's going to. But also, like I told you, I feel like this whole season's been setting us up for it just to be a bad season. Like they've made jokes about it, those throwaway jokes, and they're like, it's kind of range true.
Yeah, I think, and I was talking to you about this earlier. I think really season three is where, towards the finale, I think the whole switch up that Butcher had on Soldier Boy was kind of the last, like, it's where everything started to collapse for me. Because I think season four was really forgettable for the most part. Victoria Newman was basically worthless. Like, let's be honest, she made some plot advancements, but they basically just trashed her character. In the same way
Yeah.
that they benched Soldier Boy, and then they benched him again here in this season for season five. And then again, the Black Noir thing pisses me off. The way that they wasted the first character, brought in the second one, wasted him in the most ridiculous way possible. And what Eric Kripke evidently was saying about what you had sent me, that all it was set up to be a bad season on purpose. It's bullshit. I don't believe that. I don't believe that he had the intention. I think it just sucks because the writing sucks. But
Yeah, and like we've had this discussion, like so obviously it's like this satires everything, like satires the MCU as well, and I think that's like been their biggest issue is like it's almost like they have the same issue that the MCU writing has, is they introduce all these characters and they don't flesh out their storylines to where their storylines are going to get finished because they don't have time to do it, you know. And it's been widely speculated that this last episode is just meant to set up, the spin-off series that they're going to have,
yeah,
which we talked about. The Marvel TV shows have been kind of the same thing. It's like they're just trying to pump out products instead of having finished products, and it's not delivering.
yeah. I think one of the big issues is when they started the series. So first of all, obviously it starts off Huey is the main character for season one, and I think they had a good premise because instead of directly adapting the comics, they took elements from the comics and put it into there. Because a lot of people don't like the boys' comics, and I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't think it's written very well. I think it's largely just a poke and jab parody. Of everything else, which is what it was designed to be, but it's really raunchy, and so they took some elements from that. But the original way that it's set up for season one of the show, Huey is put in a position, and the boys in general, where they have to take down Soups where they don't have any powers, versus in the comics where Mother's Milk is a Soup himself. He gets his powers from drinking his mother's milk. You have different elements like that. I know it's ridiculous, right? But I think the concept of finding creative ways to take down really bad people that have superpowers it's a good concept. And I think season one was so good because first of all, you're figuring out how you get rid of the invisible guy, right? Like how do you kill him right
Yeah.
off the bat? It's finding unique ways to deal with that, and they did that in the Diabolical spinoff too, where they were showing like we got to his drug dealer, we poisoned his drugs basically, so the dude's flying. I forget what his name is. I think was it Bombshell in that where he crashes into the big metal guy.
I'm not sure. I never watched the Diabolical
Okay.
series, so
Yeah, it's a collection where they have one of the episodes. It's all different, like animation style, almost like what they did with Star Wars for like on Disney Plus, where they had the different animation styles for like spin off in one season. But
yeah.
there was an episode that was like animated in the style of the comics, and it was the process of like Butcher and Huey going to the drug dealer of one of the soups that can fly, and they're having this big event, and just finding a creative way of like, we got to his drug dealer, we got him to, you know, switch out his drugs and give him like super speed and whatever, so his heart's going crazy, and he crashes in and kills one of like the biggest tank heroes in the series. But I think having a concept like that, which the boys did in season 1, it's really good. It's something that's different.
Yeah.
And I think that they strayed away from that by giving all of the characters superpowers, except for Mother's Milk and Frenchie. But, you know, giving Butcher the superpowers, giving Huey superpowers for a period of time. It became less about inventively trying to take something and like, oh yeah, we're going to find creative ways to kill these really bad soups. Instead, it just becomes what you were saying, a parody of the MCU where they have soups fighting each other, but they're not even well put together fight scenes. I think that's a big problem too.
Well, yeah, and a topic I'd like to piggyback on because you brought that up, like the way they killed Victoria Newman was so like compared to all the other deaths of like the characters, like that one just kind of happened. Like he just came in, and ripped her in half. Like there was no build up to it, like a lot of the other soups that got killed, where they just ripped her right in half, and you're just like, oh shit, he just did that.
Yeah. And that leads me also to if you took Stan Edgar out of the plot of the show, nothing would change. I really think they put Giancarlo Esposito in the position where it's like, hey, this is a really cool name actor, let's put him in the show, and they didn't know what to do with him. In the same way they didn't know what to do with Noir. They didn't know what to do with Soldier Boy, which is why they froze him like 4 separate times. They don't know what to do with these characters that they're putting in. And the big thing for me with Soldier Boy is season 3, he was a very nuanced character. He was very different from like the superficial thing they were doing with Homelander, you know, and part of that is Jensen Ackles go, he puts the weight on, he works out, gets the muscles, which is very different to Homelander where he looks artificial. You know what I mean? There's a contrast. Yeah. But they give him actual depth of a character talking about how his dad was, you know, like he felt like he was a letdown, which leads to great lines with Homelander where he's like, you know, you're a pussy type of deal, where he's being that father figure that his father was to him. But they took the writing of Soldier Boy and, like I said, they made him the Legend in this, where the Legend is that other character who just makes sex jokes about women that you've never heard of unless you're 40, 50 years old. It's the same thing they did to Soldier Boy. They got rid of all the nuance of his character in the writing and they turned him into just like a slop joke type of character, and then they froze him again.
Yeah. I think a big part of the writing for Soldier Boy though was it was Jensen Ackles, and like everyone's talked about every scene he
Steals it.
stole. So so I'm like I think that's why he kept getting brought back. I don't think they necessarily had plans for him beyond that first, that first season he was in, but because how like popular Jensen Ackles is because of Supernatural and that stuff that he's done, like his popularity carried over that because obviously Eric Kripke having worked with them for the first 5 seasons of Supernatural. Like he had that familiarity, so he's like, all right, I'm gonna bring Jensen onto this because he did another show like right before The Boys, I think that like caught some traction, but it got canceled.
Hmm.
And so obviously Kripke brought him over, did that, and like I said, he stole every scene he was in. So like we got to bring him back, and they kept bringing him back, and his writing, like obviously they knew to play to his strengths, and the strength ended up being all those sex jokes. Like every time he delivered one, like it was delivered perfectly. Like it was great. Like every time you're like, yep.
Yeah.
But I think that was the huge issue was his popularity got bigger than the writing. If you kind of get what I'm saying there, like sometimes that happens with characters where like, I'll bring up another show where that kind of happened, like, but not in the sense like, so on Scrubs, the janitor, he didn't have a lot of lines, but he was so popular on the way he delivered the lines that they just kept giving him more and more. And I kind of tie that into this is what they did with Jensen Ackles. They're like, well, you did so good this season. Let's bring you back again. But they had no creative ways to keep getting rid of him from the show except from the original way they did it, which once again lies on the writing. They got to think of a better way to get rid of him instead of just ice, ice, ice.
Yeah. Well, and I think taking what you're saying there, that leads me back to what the series in season 1 originally was, which was from Huey's perspective as the main character. I think what happened is because Anthony Starr and Karl Urban are so good in their roles, they took what the original idea was and they tweaked it to give it's the Butcher and the Homelander show. Huey was the main character for the first season, and then they have pushed him aside where he really doesn't affect much in the plot. Like, yeah, they had the thing for, season 3 with Herogasm. Basically, when the A-Train plot was over, Huey's role in the show was over. And A-Train became a good guy in season 3 when he got the heart transplant and did all that stuff and had to deal with his brother and all the shit that had happened, right? But they've sidelined Huey's character in the same way they've sidelined Annie's character with Starlight, where she hasn't done anything, Huey hasn't done anything. And I think, again, it does lead back to, because Butcher and Homelander have been so good, they've done that, they pushed that to be the forefront of everything, where those two characters are getting the most attention, which isn't a bad thing, but the problem is every other character suffers as a result of that.
Yeah. And I mean, so I kind of get the whole Butcher Homelander thing because obviously I haven't read the comics, but I know that's kind of like the last confrontation is Butcher going to Homelander, but actually Black Noir,
Yeah.
the weird twist. Oh, that's something I was going to touch on too. I feel like that's a part of the reason Black Noir was so poorly written too, was because obviously in the comics he was a clone of Butcher, and
Oh,
they already had
Homelander, yeah.
stated yeah, they already stated very early on that they weren't going that route. So it's like, what do you do with a character like that when you have to completely change who they were from the comics? So I think that's part of the reason Black Noir was so poorly written. And like I said, the whole conflict between Butcher and Homelander, obviously that was going to be one of your last confrontations, but the way they did it, like, I've seen, obviously we talk about this all the time, but I think I sent you an article where they said the the chemistry between Starlight and Huey's been off since like season 3, like season 4 it wasn't there. And now I don't know if that's writing. I don't know if that's just the actors genuinely just don't have chemistry anymore because that can happen from time to time. So that's one of the interesting subplots too that I don't think it's talked about enough was like something just seemed off between Starlight and Huey. And like I said, I don't know if that's a writing thing. I don't know if that's just the actors lost the chemistry because we're on the 5th season. How many years has it been since the show
I think
started?
it started in 2019, right? I'm pretty
So
sure.
yeah, so we're about 7 years later, something like that.
Yeah, July 26th, 2019 is when it started. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously I know the actor that plays Starlight, she had stated that she had a lot of health issues during season 5, and by the time it was done, she like couldn't walk or something like that.
Hmm.
So I mean that could be part of it too, because like obviously her character's tired in the story, but like her acting, I don't know if it's off because that's how it's written to be, or if it's just the actor, like she was genuinely really struggling because what is it? She had like Graves' disease, I believe it was.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, and people were commenting a lot. There's all the controversy about how her face changed, and people are wondering whether it has to do with like facelift or Botox or whatever, or if it has to do with her Graves' disease. There's back and forth with that on the internet, but obviously I don't know. You know what I mean? But she definitely looks different than she did when the series started.
Yeah. Oh, wait, am I frozen still?
Yeah, he
What
just
happened?
froze.
And let me try this back. There we
Yeah.
go. There we go.
I would want to say too, for their relationship in the writing in the show has been kind of, it's been a reoccurring thing in the sense that it's will they, won't they. It's like, oh well, they're together, but Huey is overprotective of Annie even though he doesn't have powers, and then he goes and he gets the powers and they fight and then back and forth. Even in this season with the whole like she fled away from him after
Oh,
the camp, and then she comes back, oh I love you, after she went to her dad's and went through that process in that episode. But it's been like a will they, won't they. But again, because they're getting less time comparatively to like the first and second seasons, even the third season, they were on screen more together. But even in season 3, they were going back and forth because Huey was working with Butcher and Soldier Boy, and Annie didn't like that. But it's
yeah.
been that constant back and forth. I just think that because they have so little time on screen, and obviously, yeah, if she's having difficulty, she had difficulty with filming season 5, sure, but I think the writing just isn't there. And I think the writing is also the issue with something like Sister Sage, who has just been a catastrophe of a character. I don't know what they're doing. And the problem is when you have a character with super intelligence, super intellect, they are only as intelligent as the people that are writing the character. So if you have a bunch of writers who don't know what the hell they're doing, but oh, this is the smartest person in the world, then you have something like, but I didn't account for emotions of a dad and a son, which is like, come on.
Yeah, so here's my take on that, and this is gonna be a weird person to compare it to, but like a good comic that kind of balances like Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, because he's kind of the same way. Like he's super scientist, but like reading emotions is not his strength. And if writing her properly, they could have pulled that off. Once again, this comes back to the satire thing. Is it poorly written just to strictly be satire, or is it just like they didn't understand what they were doing with her character?
Well, the biggest hypocrisy with with her whole character is when they originally show what her powers are. It says empathic accuracy. Like that's one of the specified, so she understands people's emotions. That's supposed to be one of her
Okay.
superpowers as listed in the show. So if it is, I don't buy the whole Eric Kripke, oh, well, you know, we meant this to be bad. I don't buy it. And even if that's the case, intentionally setting yourself up to have a poor ending to a series that spanned for 7 years, I think that first of all, you should want to have a good conclusion or a strong final season to a show that you're expecting multiple spin-offs from because you want to keep people engaged and you want them to go and follow the content. But they assassinated the character of Soldier Boy. They have written them, I think they wrote themselves into a corner. I think they did that with the process of incorporating Soldier Boy, and like you said, they probably didn't intend to keep him for more than the first season, but because of how prominent he was, in the same way I feel that because of Homelander and Butcher getting more screen time and Huey being pushed to the side, I think they incorporated more Soldier Boy because they wanted him. And I think that's especially true because they didn't include him the whole season 4 because they probably already had it written. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then they bring him back season 5 and they really don't know what to do with the character. And then it goes back and forth again. It's like, well, does he love Homelander? No, he actually doesn't. But he does. And we're going to kill the other guys from Supernatural because, you know, why not? I don't know. I disagree with the premise that they intentionally made it bad. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with that in a sense. Like, I feel like it's definitely a scapegoat thing. Obviously, yes, I know the show's built on satire, but when does that like satire become like a crutch for you? And I think that's kind of what we've seen with this last season is like, all right, where's your cutoff line between satire and just being bad?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, too, even with Homelander's writing originally, you know, obviously he's a parody and Vought is a parody of, well, at the time, DC, really. Like, that's what they were parodying with the Seven and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He was a more complex character. Like, he was written better. If you go back and watch season 1, he's a character that has more, again, nuance. I think that they came in with the idea of what they wanted to do and they altered it. But I think he's become such a parody of, obviously, Donald Trump. Like, there's no splitting hairs about that. But they have
Yeah.
gone so far into parody land that instead of writing the character, he has just become one big walking parody. Instead of having like an actual character like he did in season 1, I think that's what they've kind of done is they pushed it to this point where they're parodying everything, and the characters as a result suffer. You know.
Yeah, and that's one thing I said. Well, I didn't say, but I was reading an article on like I think just before we started this, they were talking about how Homelander used to be genuinely like terrifying. Like people
Yeah.
were scared to see Homelander, and now he's not more so terrifying. He's just like someone that's like a whining, I'm God,"
Yeah.
like stuff like that.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's just gotten to the point where, and the closest that they got in this for like him being terrifying was that scene with Frenchie where he taps and he's boom just appears in front of him. I don't know if you're caught up with that episode, but
No, I do know what happened. I know Frenchie dies at the end, so I do know that.
Yeah, so basically,
Cause
in order to protect Sage and Kimiko, he has them in a zinc container in the compound that they're at, and Homelander gets there, and he goes and he like Frenchie just taps on the wall, and Homelander boom just appears in front of him, and it's the closest that he's come to actually being terrifying again. But yeah, he's just become kind of
yeah,
a baby, like a big baby. And it's like, well, and I think that a lot of that has to do with just parodying something that you probably politically don't agree with and pushing that as like instead of writing the character himself. I think that can be a part of it.
yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the finale is coming up, and I've seen some people talking about leaks. And the question is, are they going to have Kimiko be the one that kills Homelander, or is Homelander going to win? I think that's the big question right now.
So here's where I'm kind of at with the finale. I've read that like every leak people have seen so far has been absolutely true. So I'm under the impression that someone is intentionally leaking stuff. That way, coming to this final episode, everyone's all like, every other leak's been true. This one's got to be true. I think that's fully being fabricated. Like, obviously, I believe the leaks, but I believe this last leak for this last episode, I believe this will be the one that is genuinely not true because I genuinely believe 90% of leaks are done intentionally. Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool,
Yeah.
one of the biggest examples. But I think they're intentionally doing that, and I think that's what the build up to this last episode has been. It's like, how can we leak stuff, everything be true, and be like, huh, so everything else has been true, so this finale's got to be true. So this is the one where I think they may deviate from all the other leaks. Obviously, we'll find out soon.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel like because Anthony Starr, he's teased like I believe he teased on X that that he was gonna win in the end. Like that was an actual tease that he had was like, oh well, guess what? I don't know what the exact tweet was, but basically he's insinuating that Homelander would win in the end, and that's where I'm kind of like, okay, so he's doing this. We have all these leaks coming out. Clearly, they're trying to push this.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm kind of weary going into this last episode to believe any leak that I see because everyone has been true so far. And that's not how it works. Sometimes when leaks, there's partial truth in them and not everything's 100%. Most of these leaks have been like 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, and looking at the teaser that they put out, because I had just watched that a little bit ago, um, Ryan's there again and is facing off with Homelander, at least like they're having a face to face. So obviously, I don't think that Ryan is going to do anything because they basically made him a non factor as a character. It's not like he can beat
Yeah.
Homelander. He tried. I just don't see that being a possibility. They also tease the virus again, which again we know that doesn't
Yeah, I've
affect
seen that.
the V1 people the same way. So the question is, and a lot of people again with like the leaks, and I know that maybe not believing, Kimiko is potentially going to have gotten the ability to do that blast because we know Soldier
Yeah.
Boy isn't coming back. We know that the virus can't affect Homelander in the same way that it won't kill him. You know what I mean? In the same way
Yeah.
it didn't kill Soldier Boy. Now, can it cause damage? Absolutely. But if they release
Yeah.
it and you have someone like Kimiko or Butcher with their suit powers, they're going to die. And it won't kill Homelander. It will incapacitate him. So the question then
Yeah.
becomes, what other option do they have except for Kimiko having the ability to blast the V1 out of his system and or he wins? That's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at, where I don't know how else they're going to deal with that character.
I definitely feel like it's going to be a group effort. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way it's just going to be a one person taken. If Homelander does get taken out, there's no way it's going to be one person. It's definitely going to be a group effort. I've obviously I've seen some leaks. I don't want to give those leaks lights because I don't like people that spoil stuff. That's why I don't like going online when shows are going on because I've had every episode of The Boys I've basically had spoiled in
Yeah.
some capacity. I know you're in the same boat as well. So it's like I don't want to get these leaks like the day of light all the time. But like I said, I definitely feel like it is going to be have to some type of group effort, and maybe Homelander does win if it's a group effort in the end, anyways. I just, it's so nerve-wracking wondering how they're gonna pull this together because this has been widely viewed as the absolute worst season of The Boys,
Yeah.
which is, so I was thinking about this. It's funny that this has been the worst season, but it's also had the highest rated episode of the entire series.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you pull something like that off? You have your worst season, but you also have your highest rated episode. Like,
Well, I mean, it's kind of in the same vein. Speaking opposite and kind of transitioning, we can go into Invincible a little bit. Invincible is in the same boat where they had the worst episode in the best season, aside from season one. People are ranking this last season as the highest one. Um, I think it's really good. The episode, obviously, Robert Kirkman wanted to do something with Damien Dark Blood,
oh,
and
okay,
so
yeah,
yeah, it was one of the things that he had scrapped previously when he was writing the comics, where it's a separate story, and a lot of people, a lot of Christian people, were very upset because it was pushing the idea of hell and this and that. They were like, in the show, they go, there is no God, but there's hell and this and that. But it wasn't a very
yeah.
well received episode anyway because it completely interrupted the war, the Viltrumite War. It was just
Yeah.
placed in the middle,
I
pushed
actually think
everything.
that's the last episode I've watched of the Invincible season. So I did catch that episode and maybe I started the next episode, but it it's hard. Obviously, that's a filler episode,
Yeah.
and I feel like filler episodes get so much hate. And it's like I get the point of having a filler episode, but I feel like since seasons are so short nowadays, we don't need filler episodes like that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's very
Because
true.
yeah, because shows used to have, 22, 23 episodes, like they're in the 20s, sometimes even pushing 30. We don't do that anymore. We get like this 10, 8 episode thing, which I'm not a fan of because I think it's really, I know the MCU for sure, it's definitely hurt the MCU and their TV show writing because like some of their TV shows have great premises. Like we've talked about like WandaVision, like it started off great and
Biggest
then
letdown.
you get to the you get to the end and it's like they tried to it almost felt like they just tried to rush to a conclusion. And I feel like that's one of the issues we have with our streaming nowadays is we do episodes so short, which it's better for the actors. Like a lot of actors have talked about it, like how like filming is so much less stressful because they're
Yeah.
not doing 20 episodes and everything, but it's also kind of hurt writing in a sense as well. Like some people have worked well off of it. Stranger Things did for seasons. We won't talk about the last season of Stranger Things.
Yeah, no. I
But
mean, the season before it was very good. It kind of revitalized the show, and then this happened, and it's like, ugh.
yeah, so it's hard to find that perfect balance. Like we get less episodes now. I feel like we just need to stop trying with filler episodes. I know they're meant to like set up future storylines, but with how short things are, I don't think you have the need to do that. You can do that and like if you know you're gonna have multiple seasons, that's like a last episode thing. Like you transition into that instead of putting it in the middle of a season and making it a filler episode.
Yeah, I think the big part of that, and this started, obviously, we go back to like Netflix. The change being from TV, like shows like the CW, where you have like The Flash and Arrow and stuff like that, being a weekly base where they're filming, for months on end and they're going kind of on the way as they go. Versus where you
Yeah.
have these contracts that are being established with Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu or whatever, and as a result, you're getting the funding. You know what you're going to do. You can put all of that together, and then you put out the product. And originally, it used to be okay, they drop everything. And I think if you have filler, it would be okay if everything was dropping at the same time. But when you have a weekly release, the same way that they used to have for television, and then you're taking filler and putting it in for a week, you're basically having a week where the audience is like, okay, so you just took away the main story that we're super focused on, which again with Invincible, that's exactly what happens because that is the only episode that deviates from like the standard plot of the whole season is that hell
Yeah.
episode. But it's like because it's a weekly release, people are waiting. They are anticipating an episode to come out and being excited about it, right? And so when you put filler in, then it's like instead of just being able to binge through it, how you could with any other show when Netflix used to drop whole seasons. you can't
Yeah.
anymore. So now you have to wait 2 weeks to get back to the plot that you're really excited about. And I think that's detrimental to these shows in general.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's something I agree with too. And like I said, it goes and you brought up a great point. So like, the CW like and their show product, like how shows used to be like they would probably have the first 2, 3 episodes done and they would respond off of feedback to those episodes. And I feel like that's what made some of our older shows better in a sense because they got the feedback from the fans. They could make changes to the scripts on the fly. Now they can't do that. Like you said, you have a single set story, and unless it's has a solid foundation from the beginning through the end, there may be something that they're like, oh, we may have messed up on that. Where human error can happen, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happens with writing TV shows. Now you don't get a chance to go back and fix maybe an error that you made unless you go completely against the continuity of the show. You make changes, and then that people catch on to that and they're like, well, we don't like that. Obviously, The Boys has been a big thing. We've talked about like just some of the major changes in the characters
Yep.
that happens when you can't have that feedback. And I know they do screen testings and all that stuff, but like screen testings are just doing stuff they've already filmed and what to take in, take out. It's not, hey, we're changing the script because the people didn't like it.
And that leads me to, because I was thinking about the reshoots and stuff too. Daredevil Born Again season 1, where they were putting out what they had originally put together for test audiences and realizing that people didn't fucking like it. And then they went and did all the reshoots and had to completely change the story in order to try and make things a little more bearable, which, just looking back on season 1 of Born Again, it's like you can tell which episodes were from the previous, like the original writing, and what was done post. You can tell when they did the
Yeah.
reshoots. You can tell how the storylines changed, and how they tried to kind of move away. Because originally they kill Foggy off, right? Everybody's pissed. Everybody's mad about that.
Yeah.
Karen gets written out of the show. She doesn't exist anymore. They end up bringing her back, which was not originally intended. They weren't going to bring her back like right there when they did. But they brought her back because people were upset. And they changed Muse's story arc. And now we have, Heather becoming Muse. I don't know. I think the reshoots can be very effective. The problem is, like you said, when you had the TV shows that were doing this in a more like monthly or weekly basis, while they're still outputting the show and they're able to film and make these writing adjustments, you can do the screen test when you put something out. But when you've already written so much and filmed so much, it's very difficult. And I felt that season 1 of Born Again suffered as a result of that. And people were not very happy with that product because it was two different things that were happening. You were taking a story that had already been put together where they had the conclusion built. Then they realized that people didn't fuck with it. So then they had to take it and completely rewrite it. And what I said for the first 3 episodes of season 2, they were trying to iron out the kinks of that original script from season 1, which is why I felt that it was slow. It was poorly paced. There were a lot of weird things going on with it. But then as soon as like episode 3 gets to the end, and as reviewers said, then it started to pick up. Then you could tell that there was a noticeable difference where the story knew where it was going, And I think it was detrimental for the whole of season 1 and then the beginning of season 2 of Born Again. And then just to go back real quick on like putting stuff out and expecting, like when you have a product that you're going to put out and it's not something that's being done regularly, I expect, and I had an issue with One Last Kill for this as we were talking about, I expect a polished product when you're taking something that, especially as a one shot like that, what your budget is, what the story is, you have everything put together, and then you have CGI, fucking PlayStation Joel falling into into a vent, and the CGI is bad and stuff like that. I expect a polished product, especially for I hold the streaming stuff to a higher standard because I know that this is not something like the CW. We all know after the first like 3 seasons of Arrow, it went to absolute dog shit. Like it was just gone. After even Ra's al Ghul was kind of ooh, But then after that, it just fell down the pipeline. And same thing with The Flash. The first season was immaculate, and then it started to go down and down and down in quality.
Yeah.
But when you have you have this period of time with streaming in between, when your seasons are, you're shooting everything. You know that everything is going to come out. I expect it to be polished. I expect there to not be filler if you're doing it on a weekly release. I expect it all
Yeah.
to be put together well. And then, like I said, reshoots for Daredevil Born Again kind of killed that first season. You know,
And I think one of the touching on Daredevil and Punisher, because I just want to touch on those characters. One of the big things for like Daredevil and Punisher is I forget the actor that plays Daredevil. It's
Charlie
gonna come to
Cox.
me. Yeah, Charlie Cox. I don't know if he caught it, but he was one of the executive producers on Daredevil for this season. I don't know if he was for the first season, but he was on the second
Mm,
season. Like he was listed as executive producer. I think that's important for, especially for these street level characters. Like, I think it should be important for all characters, but like, especially the street level characters that you're getting TV shows for, that they are a part of the process. Cause like Charlie Cox, he loves Daredevil. Like,
yep.
it's a passion of his. Vincent DeFaro, hopefully I didn't butcher his name,
D'Onofrio.
but he was,
D'Onofrio. Yeah.
ah, but
Yep.
he was also executive producer, and like that's so important to the development of these characters. And John, the same thing with Punisher. Like he said, I will not work another Punisher product unless I'm a part of the vision for it. That's so important for people that are passionate about these characters. 'Cause, like he is so passionate about Punisher. Like every time you hear him talk about it, like he's just so passionate. That's so important to me for these characters, like especially the street level ones that aren't maybe going to get that TV time just because they're not bigger characters, but like these TV shows that they're a part of the process. And I think that was a huge thing for the first season of Daredevil was Charlie Cox was trying to give his input, and they weren't fully listening to him. But then they like changed the writers up, and that's when they started listening to him. That's when you can see the change. Like you saw the change in the tone of the show, and season two was just we have our different opinions on the last episode. The more that we've got time to let it set in, but I mean, it was a masterpiece that last season. Like that's one of the better superhero TV shows we've had in a while. Was just because Charlie Cox had an input in it, Vincent had an input in it. The one kill, I mean, there's a few, the CGI things. I had a problem with the volume. I know you didn't have that issue, but like overall, it was a good Punisher product.
I
And it was
agree.
because these guys they have that, they're executive producers on it. That's so important. And I would love to see that going forward for the TV shows that like your main actors that are truly passionate about playing these characters. I know that's harder to do with a big scale movie just because now every superhero movie is a team up movie.
Yeah.
It's
Big
harder to
problem.
do it in that sense. But like I said, when we have these TV shows, we can do stuff like that. Like put them as a producer, let them have their opinions about the characters. Obviously, everyone's not going to agree on everything. Like I'm sure there was stuff that Charlie Cox wanted that didn't happen, but he had an input, he had a voice. Like he's not acting against his will. Maybe, there's some things he thought he should change and they didn't change it, but he still went out there and like it's a great performance. I know. And it's crazy. Charlie Cox was talking about this too. Like no other character has been on screen longer than Daredevil as the same character.
Hmm.
Like Iron Man, even with all his movies, has not been on screen that time. I think he said there's a total of like 40 hours that he's been Daredevil now. Like no one else has been a character for that long. So yes, he should have that voice, and I'm glad they gave it to him.
Yeah, I think it's important whenever you're doing an adaptation to have people that are passionate, both directors, writers, and actors that are passionate about the characters that they're involving themselves with. Because otherwise, you have productions like Paramount when they did Halo, which was an absolute nightmare. People hated that show, rightfully so, because they went out of their way to say, we don't give a shit about the games or the books. They said that they didn't care about the games at all, and then they went
Yeah.
and produced that show, which was very poorly received and obviously got canceled as a result.
And it was
But
disappointing too, because like the action in that show was so awesome.
it
Like,
was.
the scenes and everything, but yeah, the writing is. Mm.
Yeah, the first episode where they were fighting the elites was really, really well done. And then they
Yeah.
ended off where he takes his helmet off in the first episode. Everybody goes and blows up the internet and this and that. But it is important, especially for like directors, just thinking like James Gunn and Superman. And I know that it's gotten mixed reviews and people have their own opinion. Largely, the Snyder crowd has their opinion. But having somebody who cares about the core of the character, and I've talked to you about this before. I like with adaptations, I don't have an issue if some things are changed, right? Like in order to fit it better, because it's really difficult to translate things from the comics directly to screen in a way that's believable, for a live action production, right? For instance, Civil War is completely different than it was in the comics. Obviously, it has to do with the rights of the characters that they had at the time, but they had to change things in order to make it more digestible, for an audience of a larger scale who's not just reading from a comic book, right? And then so you have core elements of a character that you can't change. There are two distinctions there. There are things you can change as long as the characters have their core. So for me, like Superman has the core of the character. I look at David Cornsweet and I see his performance and I see the way that James Gunn put it together. And I think that is Superman. Even if I have issues with the CGI and I have issues with some of the things that were going on in that movie, it's not a perfect movie, but the core of the character is still there. And that's why I have some leniency with things like Spider-Man, even though we had the whole Aunt May is the one with the great power and responsibility, and we're just going to ignore what the Russo brothers said about Uncle Ben because everybody is ignoring him for that. But the core of the character for Tom Holland is still there. Like he's a good Spider-Man. I would say that nostalgia-wise, I would still go Tobey. And Andrew is the best Spider-Man of the group of them. Not the best Peter Parker, but... Camera's dying again.
Yeah, that's a podcast for another day. We can go over all the Spider-Man actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean...
Yeah, going
I
back...
forgot where I was going, you're good.
Oh, yeah. Going back to Born Again, we can talk then about Season 2 and kind of the differences of opinion we had. I am getting what people are now calling Fisk fatigue. I am at that point with the character where I'm kind of tired of him being in every single season and being the main antagonist, except for the original Season 2 of the Netflix show. I'm getting kind of tired of him.
So, obviously, we had this conversation when we were a lot younger because the Netflix show came out when we were a lot younger. You remember I was very adamant that I was not a fan of the writing of Kingpin. I thought he was more babyish than intimidating. And obviously, I've definitely came around to him, and I get why some people are tired of him. I actually have grown more fond of him just because I think the writing has been done so much better. I think I won't say he was a bad actor before. I think it could have been a writing thing, but he's done great as Kingpin. I have seen many reports that say they're kind of moving on from him. Obviously, with Kingpin, he's always going to have some type of hand in what's happening in New York City. Whether
Yeah.
we see that in Spider-Man, I mean, we saw him in Hawkeye. We don't talk about that show. Anywho, Kingpin, he's around in New York. He's always going to have some type of presence. Now, what they do with him in the future, I don't think they're even going to touch on it. Maybe a slight reference because Daredevil does like to make references just for the fans' sake, and I like that they do that. But I don't think we're going to see him at all in season 3.
He's on
I
set.
think
He's in the set
he's
pictures.
okay. He's in the set pictures. It's probably not going to be much.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say. I don't think he's going to have a huge point to the plot, kind of like some characters you see that are kind of just there. I firmly believe that Lady Muse is going to be a huge focus
Yeah.
on season 3, as she should be. I've seen rumors about like 6 different characters that are going to be introduced. I hope they don't do that because you kind of know my opinion on villains. When you introduce too many at once, it really. Spider-Man 3 was a great
Yeah,
example
that's what
of
I was
that.
gonna say. Yep.
They did too much. I mean, No Way Home, they did it in a great way that you didn't feel overwhelmed by all the villains because there's quite a few villains in that. Um, maybe Daredevil can do it, and it's like the only way I see them introducing that many villains is once is like you see a group meeting and there's like a bunch of the villains there. but I don't know how you go about doing that on a TV show.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know it happens in the comics all the time. Doing it on a TV show, that's a different story. Like, they're probably, I would say at max 2 to 3 villains and have it fleshed out. I don't know how many episodes they're doing. They did 8 for this season, didn't they?
Yeah, I think yeah, it was 8. Yeah.
Okay, so I could see like, introducing a character, the character, obviously Lady Muse will probably be the start. Um, I would say around the third I would say around the third episode, that's probably when they would like introduce another villain and maybe end it with a tease of another villain, kind of like they did with season 2, they tease Lady Muse. Um, Now the question is, did they try and tie it to the MCU? Because I've seen an article saying that like, hey, maybe she became Lady Muse because of, I know you haven't watched Thunderbolts, New Avengers, whatever you want to call it. But, he did his thing where he basically put all of New York in like dreams of their worst
Yeah, the
nightmares. And
Void.
they're saying that,
Yeah.
yeah, and they're saying that she had to like relive the muse so many times, and that's part of what broke her psyche. Because obviously there is a little bit of a time jump between season 1 and 2 of Daredevil. Am I mistaken?
I think so, but I don't think it's a lot.
Yeah, but
No,
they're saying like
yeah. Yeah. I think there is a jump. Let me see. Go ahead.
okay. But yeah, they're saying that like her psyche change up kind of like in that short amount of time doesn't really make sense unless she was a part of the thing that, getting sucked into the void. And that's part of what she had to relive was the thing that happened with Muse and that kind of broke her psyche. So, I mean, that would be cool. I don't want it to have ties to the MCU unless they're like the loosely like they used to do in the Daredevil. Technically say they're part of the MCU, but have those like newspaper headlines of like MCU stuff. It would be cool if there's little references like that. I don't want a complete tie into the MCU because I think they're kind of in a disarray right now, and obviously, I think we're heading towards a soft reboot, whatever that means. I don't know. Another topic I wanted to touch on since you brought it up was like the Civil War thing and not having the rights to the characters. Since you brought it up, I'm going to talk about this. I loved the Civil War movie, but I absolutely couldn't stand the fact that they did it so early on because like after that movie was made, didn't they get the rights to quite a few of those characters and start developing movies for like the Fantastic Four?
It was a decent period. I think like a year or two after the
Yeah.
release of that movie is when they started working with Fox to try and acquire it. Yeah.
So like I think they should have held off on the Civil War storyline because that was such like one of the most important like Marvel comic runs of the I think it was what early 2000s at this point.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so that was like one of their most important comic runs, and I think the movie did it wonderful with what they had, but they should have waited on it. Like, there's so many important mutants that were involved in Civil War and stuff,
Well,
which
that
is
mean yeah,
something
the mutants caused the entire events of it by
yeah,
blowing up a school. Yeah.
yeah, like, so I was really disappointed that they didn't hold off longer on that storyline. Obviously, like I said, we're heading towards this soft reboot, whatever that means. Obviously, we know what happens in Secret Wars in the comics, whichever one you want to go off of. You can go off the original one, the third, seventh, however many times Marvel decides to do it because they can't come up with original ideas anymore.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's like, how do we pull this off? Now they have the rights to a lot of characters, so I think they can do justice to the Secret War storyline. But I
Ah,
think this is not sure. I mean, they did the Civil War twice in the comics too, because it was another one of those things. They didn't have any original ideas. So they're like, all right, let's try, get this twice. I don't think it was a very high received comic storyline, the Civil War 2. I didn't read much of it. I don't know how fans liked it. I'd have to dive into that myself, but I definitely would like to see Civil War revisited once we actually have mutants involved in the MCU. And I know that's kind of their next plan after what is it, Secret Wars? That's when they plan on doing the mutant saga.
uh, probably. Obviously, we know the mutants are going to be in Doomsday, but it's going to be crossover from old or different characters. So I'm not sure how they're going to do it exactly. And again, we don't know if Jean Grey is gonna be the one in Brand New Day.
I don't make me have this conversation on this podcast.
um,
So I'll try to dive into the backstory on this one for us. So I've talked with Steven multiple times. Like I I love Sadie Sink as Jean Grey. I think that would be a great casting choice. But if they do it for a Spider-Man movie, I'm gonna be so frustrated. Like you can't introduce a character of Grey's caliber in a Spider-Man solo movie. How can you do something like that? I've seen the, rumors that maybe like Typhoid Mary,
yeah.
which I think that'd be another good one. It's just like I said, you don't know what to trust with leaks because sometimes they put leaks out to try and get you to go this direction, or some people actually have real leaks. You don't know, but I've told Steven, I'll tell you guys. Sorry, just use your real name. We
like
can edit.
like I haven't done that before in any of the videos.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna be very frustrated if they use her as Jean Grey, even though I think it's a great casting choice. I just don't think you do that. Introduce one of probably the top five X-Men character ever, and one of the most important X-Men characters, because I don't think the X-Men reached the popularity they reached without the whole Dark Phoenix saga. Like you don't reach that without that storyline. To introduce Jean Grey, the main component of that character, in a Spider-Man movie as a throwaway character, I can't
She
see.
wouldn't be a throwaway character.
Well,
She's
I
probably would
mean,
be integral to the plot, if I would have to
yeah, but
assume. Yeah.
they almost make her seem like she's in a villainous role, and I'm like, you don't introduce Jean Grey as a villain, and you don't introduce her as a puppet to Punisher.
I don't.
Punisher's sidekick is Jean Grey. That's a horrible idea. Who greenlit that idea? But I, like I said, I'm not convinced that she is Jean Grey. I think there's just that connection because obviously Sadie Sink, red hair, younger actor, and
But also
maybe they,
the control of mind, like the mind control for the character, like the people in the trailer. That's another
yeah.
big. Like, does Typhoid Mary control people's minds?
No, I mean
No.
there's only two people, and it was Jean Grey and then their daughter
Yeah.
from alternate timeline.
So it's
Which I
like,
mean that could be a route they go to. But also, I've heard, they could be trying to do that like most Spider-Man movies have in their trailers, like to kind of throw you off the trail. Like I know you've read it and I've read it, the rumors of like potentially Venom.
yeah, and that's the big question with that is it going to be Man Spider, which I just don't think they're going to do. I don't see it
Yeah.
being the case.
Yeah, like I said, I think it would be cool if they did, the 90s Spider-Man like thing with the Punisher and when he
Yeah.
became Man Spider. Like that'd be awesome to see pulled off. I just don't see them doing the Man Spider just because of how profitable Tom Holland is as Spider-Man and may turn some kids off of Spider-Man. So I don't see them taking, like, trust me, they'll take risks, but I don't think that's one of the risks they'll take that like they lose that children following. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't see them doing that.
Well, and that's the thing is inherent. The reason why I was so like adamant that they weren't going to do it, and I don't think they will, is just because Man Spider is fucking scary. Like that's a scary thing to show to kids. Number one, it's one thing when it's in an animated series, but to make that in a live action where you're going to CG into a big giant spider humanoid creature
Yeah.
is fucking terrifying. And I just don't think that'll be the case, which is why I lean more heavily to Venom. And if you think about Insomniac Spider-Man 2, where Peter goes to sleep and Venom, the symbiote, takes control of his body, that to
Yeah.
me could mean something, but it doesn't explain why his powers have changed, why he's whipping from his wrists like
Okay.
Toby.
That I kind of understand. So obviously there's going to be some changes in him.
Yeah.
It's happened many times in the comic books where he has changes outside of the Man Spider where, he does have some issues and he starts changing a little more because the DNA is not fully written inside of him. It's changing. So I definitely could see how that could happen where it happens organically. He's under a lot of distress because of everything that's happened. I could definitely see his powers changing because of that. I've always been a bigger fan of the organic webbing. I just feel like that makes sense for the Spider-Man character. I know the comics have gone that way too, where it's like, yeah, this makes sense. Obviously, early on, Peter Parker genius, it makes sense for
Yeah.
him to have web slingers. As he evolved, I'm full on for the organic web swinging. That's just my personal preference. I just feel how that makes the most sense for the character. We'll see. I'm very excited for Spider-Man. Obviously, big Spider-Man fan. You're a big Spider-Man fan as well. It's the first time we've gotten a fourth movie
Yeah.
in a Spider-Man series. So,
Well, really, it is the first because everything else has been eradicated. They're going to bring it back, but
yeah.
and that's what scares me. What scares me is I am terrified they're going to completely invalidate the ending of No Way Home by bringing in doing the
Unf
same thing that they were doing by okay, now Ned and MJ and Ned and MJ are going to know who he is by the end of the film, and I guarantee, I'm not guarantee, but it's very likely MJ is going to remember who he is prior to. I think that's what's going to happen, but also it's already a cameo fest. We're already getting a bunch of cameos. We're gonna have the Hand, which doesn't make sense without Daredevil. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. You have the Punisher in
Honestly,
there.
I agree.
Yeah, and we don't know who Sadie Sink is playing, but Sadie Sink, you have the Hulk in there too. You have Bruce Banner. So what scares me is instead of making it, and I'm very grateful. We're gonna have Tombstone. We're gonna have Michael Mando finally as Scorpion. Finally, we're getting a live action Scorpion. That's great. I am terrified of the idea that we're going to go straight back into all of these different cameos and on all this different stuff instead of just letting him be Spider-Man. And the big thing that I'm scared of, because I was very excited at the end of No Way Home where he goes out, he has his homemade suit and he's going doing things. I think they're going
Yes.
to time skip and just show flashbacks of him because I think at this point he's like what, a senior in college. I think they're gonna skip all of the college time with Spider-Man and go towards it, just show you flashbacks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that's what they're going to do as well. So we obviously you just brought up there's definitely characters that are confirmed for the movie, and this is what I like. We haven't really seen them yet. So that
Yeah.
tell like this trailer almost makes me feel like they're showing you who's going to be the cameos of the movie because they don't want you to know the true plot of the movie. And I think this trailer has been very deceptive intentionally. Like, and I like that. And I told you when the trailer came out, I'm like, I don't want another trailer
Yeah.
because this trailer is purposely deceptive. They did what they're supposed to do, and they didn't show you like some of the, I would assume, main villains. Scorpion, I think, will be the main villain, but like you said, Tombstone was casted. We haven't seen him in any trailer.
Yeah.
I do agree on the MJ and Ned thing. I do think, unfortunately, MJ is going to remember by the end of the movie. I hope they use it, and I know this may be like a cheap cop out, but I hope Ned becomes Hobgoblin.
I just don't like his actor in that role. I
I
don't
get
see him as that.
I agree as well. I think they've made him too much of a goofy, and I truthfully, I don't think they're going to go that route, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it would make the most sense for the story for this to like push him towards become the Hobgoblin because now he has so much resentment. Like he's like, you've been watching us this whole time. You know, we used to be best friends, all this and all that. And I think that'd be a great way to drive him towards becoming a villain. Unfortunately, the way his character's been written, I just don't know how you pull that off in a movie. Obviously, in a comic book, you can do that so much differently because you have the time to develop all that backstory. And that's what really sucks with movies, comic book movies in a sense, because a lot of times when we get a comic book movie, we have a sense of what's going to happen because most of the fans that read the comics as well, they're like Endgame and Infinity War, like we knew what was happening. We know what's going to go on with Thanos. That's where movies make it hard because you don't get that backstory that the comics give you. I
Hmm.
mean, they'll give you like, hey, this is the comic we're kind of basing this off, and you can go read it and you can kind of put pieces together. But it's harder to do with a movie because you don't get that backstory. And like you said, he had an awesome costume at the end of No Way Home. Like
Yeah, and we're
that
not gonna
Spider-Man
get it.
costume was a thing of beauty. And like you said, it's probably just going to be held to flashbacks. I assuming he's probably going to be swinging around New York after the whole Void thing, and he's probably going to be saving people during that as well. I don't know if he'll get pulled into the Void. Maybe that could be a thing. Maybe he was pulled into the Void, and that's what triggers his change.
Well, and the
I
other thing,
didn't just think of that until now.
well, the other thing too is if he was trapped in the, I think the problem with this situation now is you have the burden of explaining why the hell he wasn't in Born Again. You have a burden to explain to us why that didn't happen because it
I
doesn't
don't think
make
they're going
sense.
to.
Which, and that's the exact, we talked about One Last Kill and the fact that it was originally, people thought it was going to be tied to why Punisher wasn't involved in the Fisk situation. They never explained how, like, what happened with him getting out. They never explained that because he was caged up with Fisk in his little compound.
Yep.
They never explained that.
Obviously,
They don't
yeah,
they don't explain where he went after because the last thing you see is him being the actual Punisher in Little Italy, killing that guy.
yeah,
And so it's like nothing was explained there. But and this is the problem that I have. As much as I love having solo movies and individual movies, you now have a burden because everything is now MCU. You have a burden to explain why these things are not connected. There is a burden, and if they don't do it, it's going to lead to more people being like, "What the fuck? Like, how does that make sense?" And people were talking about, and you saw me arguing with people on Twitter. It didn't make sense for Peter to be there for Little Italy for like the 20 minutes of fighting that was happening there. Didn't make sense. Some guy was like, well, you know, Queens is right next to it. But I'm like, he's in Manhattan. He's going presumably to a Manhattan college because he's wearing
yeah.
that when he's meeting up with Bruce in the trailer. But you have a burden to explain to us why something as big as Wilson Fisk, which is a Spider-Man villain, not a Daredevil villain, although you would think that at this point, you would wonder why he wasn't involved with that process. And there has to be some level of understanding or explanation. But
And I think that was one of the biggest downfall of comic books in general was like at one point every single superhero in the MCU was basically based in New York, and that's when they started to have like the X-Men moved what was it, San Francisco, like all the teams started moving because they're like, yeah, this logically doesn't make sense to have all these heroes in New York and they're not running into each other. I think that's something that the cartoons from like when we were kids did really well. Like, yeah, they would be in there, and, they would run into each other, but like they all had their own issues. And I think that's one of the hard things with the TV shows is trying to explain like Spider-Man doesn't need to be in Punisher. I mean, arguably he could have been in Daredevil,
yeah,
but like they're all dealing with their own personal issues. They can't always, help each other out like that. Like Jessica Jones, she didn't have her own issue. That's why she was able to help. I mean, she did, but it tied back to New York, and that's why she went to New York and helped because she was tied into that. Spider-Man, we don't know if Spider-Man was tied into that, and I think that's one thing that people miss as well is that each one of these heroes, they all have their own issues. It's just unfortunate that they're all based in New York.
yeah. I think it just the biggest issue and the thing that kind of scares me about that. Like you can go and retroactively be like when Brand New Day comes out, Spider-Man was doing this or that he was preoccupied for Daredevil Born Again. The Punisher doesn't make any sense in that situation because he was directly tied to Kingpin, and we don't understand how he got
Yeah,
out. We don't understand, why he wasn't available to be involved because they don't give us that information
yeah,
with the one shot, which is what people thought it was going to be. So the Spider-Man thing is kind of different. But I was going to say that's why I really like the idea of DC. I don't want it to necessarily be a DCU. I prefer having individual movies that don't have to tie together because you put this
yeah,
burden on yourself. And the MCU, I've been saying, it's spoiled people because they've had so much crossover. And we were talking about this. It's been since Civil War where they put all of these characters in a Captain America movie, which was basically an Avengers movie, all this
yeah,
crossover, and they realized how successful that these crossover, like Avengers, obviously, the new Avengers was a huge deal, but it was typically a build up to that. Through a whole phase, you would get to an Avengers movie where you would have all of these
yeah,
solo movies in between. But they realized how much money they were making and how well it sold and how well it was rated, and they just started crossing people over everywhere. So when because you've had so much crossover in these individual movies. Now, when there isn't crossover, it is now a burden to explain why there wasn't a crossover for these characters. That's the
Yeah, well, that was
problem.
like I think the biggest one for the MCU is when they did the Eternal movie, and the dude was just frozen in the earth, and
Yeah,
everyone's like, "All right, when are we gonna get a payoff? When are we gonna pay off?"
you
I
don't.
think it's another thing too. Fans have grown impatient. There was a payoff. It was in Captain America, but
Oh,
fans have grown so impatient because, like, I remember the first time we got Thanos teased was at the end of Avengers 1. We didn't get Thanos till about almost 10 years later.
yeah.
And I think that's people want that immediate payoff now, and I think that's really what's hurt the MCU was because before they could build it up, like we built up the Thanos, like we knew he was gonna end up showing up, but we had those movies in between. Now they're trying to do it, and people are immediately like, we need the payoff right now. Like this cameo that we had, we need this the next movie, and I think that's been a big issue as well. I think some like I get some of the hey. I get it sometimes, but sometimes people are just like they want stuff too immediately. And then that puts the writers like, oh, well, we got to explain this now instead of maybe they had further plans to flesh it out more. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, sorry, I had something weird just happen in my earbud.
Like,
But um they want that payoff immediately and it's not happening in the way they want it. Like I said, the Eternals one, people kept asking, so we're not just going to talk about that giant person in the center of the ocean, yada, yada, yada. We finally got it in Captain America. I don't think writers are getting time to flesh out what they want to do with it, and they're forced to like throw it in a different movie. Like, for example, like Captain America was a payoff to the Eternals, and I don't know what the time was between those, but because this phase was viewed so badly, people didn't care about the payoff anymore. And I think that's been another thing too, is like people just have not cared about a lot of these Marvel movies after Endgame, because what was it? It was Eternals. We had Shang-Chi, which I mean, some people cared about, but the ending was,
the ending
you know,
blew it. Just like WandaVision, the big CGI battle bullshit.
yeah, we had
Stupid.
the Captain America movie. I can't remember every movie that's came since then unless I had it in front of me, but like a lot of people I think immediately went into trashing. Like after Endgame, I think it really spoiled fans of what a Marvel movie is, and they wanted all Endgame level stuff. And I feel like that's why a lot of the stuff since Endgame has been trashed. I think it's been a more of a, hey, we need you to match the level of Endgame, which is not going to happen. Like that was years and years of build up.
Well, and this
Fans
is
don't want,
this is where I would say there's two differing things that are happening here. Number one, Thanos was teased, but he was completely separate from everything that was
yeah,
going on. So we had time where he would pop up in teasers, typically at the end of Avengers movies, right? Where you would see him, but
yeah,
he's completely removed. There were tie ins, obviously, you talk about. Ronan with the Guardians being a part of, Thanos' crew
yeah.
and the Kree and all of this other stuff. The difference is that he was completely separated and they had time to process and just use that as a teaser. I think it's less of the fans wanting immediate payoff. Let me, before I get to that. And the other separation and distinction is that you could build that up over a long period of time because he was not an immediate part of everything that was going on. But then you have stuff like the street level where that becomes the burden, or things that are like within the same area, the same
Yeah.
city. It's two separate issues. And I think it's less to do with the payoff for something like a Thanos, where it's like we have to have this immediately. I think the problem is they rushed too quickly without a plan into Kang the Conqueror. I think they took a character that should be very, very important and is a huge Avengers threat in the comics, and they did not flesh out what they wanted to do. Because when the first time that you interact with him and Ant-Man is beating one of the variants' asses, you just kind of ruin it. And they ruin Ant-Man in the movies too, but that's neither here nor there. I think that the issue is they didn't go in with a plan because Disney was so content with pumping out, knowing that they were getting the money and earnings from it. I think that was a big issue. Also, your camera is frozen. But that was a big problem. And so, and that was with the television shows too, that they were rapidly going and pumping out content that they really didn't plan out. They didn't flesh it out the way they did for the Infinity Saga.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. fan, like your core Marvel fan, like us, we're gonna watch the shows regardless. Like maybe not right away, but we're gonna watch it regardless. Like I think I've watched every Marvel show that's came out, like basically when it's came out, just because it is Marvel, and obviously I have my love for comic book shows, and I make sure that I watch whatever comes out. Same thing with DC. It's not just like I'm a Marvel fanboy, although I prefer Marvel. Like I watch every superhero related that comes out just because that like I love that stuff. But yeah, they were just like pumping stuff out, pumping it out. And I'm glad that they've slowed down with
Yep.
it. I love the plan that they kind of have out now. I love that the animated seasons of their shows, like X-Men 97, that's going to be like a yearly, the Amazing Spider-Man or whatever it is, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man TV show. I think
Yeah.
they're planning on that being yearly. Like, I love stuff like that. Like, make stuff like that yearly. Have your yearly stuff. And I'm glad that they have the MCU animation stuff now because you could have that be your yearly stuff now because your core fans, they're going to watch stuff like that to hold them over to the next movie. I love the idea of having like, I think obviously I'm pretty sure they've done it, but I agree there should be a Marvel movie like at least one a year
Yeah.
at the very least. I think they should put out at least one movie a year. I think that's a great idea. Make sure the writing's good. That's why I'm glad this Blade movie that's been put back and put back, they're
They're not gonna
taking the
do it.
time. I don't think they're going to do it at this point, but I'm glad that they didn't just put out a half-ass movie. I'm glad that they're, taking time with something like that. If it ever happens at this point, I doubt it will,
Yeah.
besides Mahershala Ali's voice being teased at the end of Eternals, another movie that was widely hated, but, you know, I want them to start taking time, and I'm glad that they're starting to take the time. They realize that they're just pumping stuff out didn't work. I mean, I think everyone ignores that Secret Invasion even
Yeah.
existed.
No, well, that's the thing. The scrolls are also very important because they took really big concepts and instead of fleshing out a storyline that made sense or put together a plan that made sense, the thing with Infinity War is they already had the ending figured out way in advance. Like they knew where they were
Yeah.
going with the plot for that. Because they were trying to pump things out so rapidly in order to continue earning money and stay relevant, they didn't plan things out, which is exactly what I said. Kang
Yeah.
is a disaster. The scrolls were a disaster. It's
And
just
that annoyed me so much about like using the scrolls the way they did. They literally could have fixed any continuity error you had, any error with a character you had. It could have just obviously it'd be like a crutch, but you could have used the scrolls as, your kind of scapegoat, which I mean fans would have called that out, but it would have been the perfect way to do it. It would have made the most sense to do it that way. And instead, we got to figure out, well, where the scrolls tie in, like who was a scroll. Like they're not even going to dive into that now because
nope.
they're so poorly received because of Secret Invasion, which sucks because like scrolls and the Kree are such an important part of the MCU. Like I think we had years of the MCU where it was actually just scrolls, and we find out later on during like the events of Secret Invasion. Wait, was that Secret Invasion?
I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Secret
yeah.
Invasion is
So,
because the scrolls were invading. Yeah.
oh yeah. So like we had that whole like years of Marvel MCU comics set up, which was, obviously everything's going to be mixed received, but obviously it was huge in the MCU and had a huge part of the continuity. I keep saying MCU when I mean comics, but we could have put that in the MCU. We could have fixed some things that maybe fans didn't like and be like, oh well, this was actually a scroll. Like obviously, like I said, it'll be called out, but it's a great way to do it. Use the scrolls for that. And they just put him in that TV show. And I mean, it sucks because I think that was some of Samuel's best acting he's done in the MCU. But unfortunately, the show sucks, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. I think a big part, really the big issue, obviously we talk about the scrolls, but going back to Kang, I think the multiverse has been just so poorly handled. And I think the big issue is, unlike Thanos, where you had the Russos that were essentially the guys in charge of the Thanos plot, right? I think
Yeah,
you had too many hands in the cookie jar for the multiverse. You had Multiverse of Madness, you had Spider-Man No Way Home, you had Ant-Man with Quantumania, which nobody fucking liked. You had so many different hands in the cookie jar instead of having one specific timeline put together of what you wanted to do with the villain and the character. And as a
yeah,
result, that's what has destroyed the couple of phases that we've been in since Endgame, right? And
Yeah.
my concern for Doomsday is, again, we have had no build up to Doom. He's gonna come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and we haven't had the adaptation for Doom since. Was he even in Fan Four Stick? I didn't watch the movie.
He was in the post credit scene.
We haven't had him since the original Fantastic Four as an adaptation. Then
Yeah. And then I think was he partially mentioned? I don't remember in the Black Panther 2, like he was kind of mentioned at the end, but not like fully. It was like I think they mentioned Latveria or something.
they mentioned Latveria, yeah, that's
Yeah, so
correct, but
obviously
not
we
a
know
Doom
that's a
name
ref.
drop. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not a Doctor Doom drop, but everybody knows who's in Latveria.
yeah,
So I mean, we had that, but yeah, like you said, there's been no build up. They're like, you know what? You know what your build up is? RDJ is Doctor Doom.
and then they mention him in the Fantastic Four. Well, they show him in the post credit,
Yeah,
but it's like, is are we going to have variants of Doom? Because if there's a Latveria on the main Earth, the Fantastic Four have a
yep,
Doom in their Earth. What are we doing?
yeah.
And
And
that's the thing.
that's
RDJ, I doubt, is going to be the main Doom. I think that they are going to use him as a variant. But
I definitely agree with that. Like even the actors that are like filming Doomsday right now, they've literally said like, yeah, there's other people that have different names in the script, so it doesn't get leaked. So obviously they're keeping. I like that they're keeping it very tight-lipped on Doomsday because obviously I trust the Russos with the MCU movies at this point. Like they've done more than enough. We'll ignore the Spider-Man comments
yeah.
because, but outside of that, like they've done so good with the MCU. I trust the process and what they're doing. Obviously, you have your leaks. I'm not going to say what any of them are. I've seen some that I'm like, okay, that would be a good movie. Obviously, I know there's all the stuff about Chris Evans coming back, yada, yada, yada. That's one of the, I'll get into this. That's one thing that really bothers me because everyone's like, man, we should get a TV series of Chris Evans returning all the Infinity Stones, yada, yada, yada.
Doesn't make
And now we're
sense.
getting, and now we're getting him back in the movie and they're all like, why?
Well, I think
Which
the differentiation there is it's bringing him back after the events where his story is completed is the same reason people are upset that RDJ is coming back as Doom. If you're doing a story where he's returning the stones, which I think is a waste of time because there really isn't a story there because the timeline hasn't shifted. He went back and put him back
yeah,
immediately. Nothing has changed in the timeline, so it's not a show. There's no premise there.
other than he stayed back in time, which I think that's the obviously that's going to be a driving factor, and that's why I think it makes sense to bring him back because obviously him staying back in time is going to play a huge plot in this movie, as it should. He broke time. He did stuff he was not supposed to. That's the same thing with Loki. Loki is not supposed to be the one holding the multiverse together.
Yeah.
That never should have happened. Um, which another thing I was going to touch on with Kang is the Loki show handled Kang so much better than the movies did,
Yes, way better.
which is so unfortunate because like they built Kang up so perfectly in that show that if they would have just followed the blueprints that that show laid out, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like they're going to have to be very careful with Loki because the whole setup for Loki was Kang was probably going to be the one that faces Loki. Now, clearly, Tom Hiddleston is in Doomsday. We don't know what capacity yet. Obviously, everyone's guessing he's going to be the one holding the timeline together.
A lot of people
I'm not.
are thinking that it's going to be where because of the Doom variants are trying to do or accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, whether that ties into Baby Richards or not, that Loki is going to be the one that intervenes. Like the idea, and
Yeah,
I think it would be a cool concept that like the sky is split and his theme starts playing and he comes down to intervene in the Dooms. I think that would be cool. But yeah,
I do too. And they just got to be so careful because Loki, the TV show, one of the good Marvel TV shows, was done so well that it's like it's scary because I think that's what a lot of people's fear is going into this movie is they're undoing a lot of stuff that made Infinity War an Endgame. I don't necessarily think they're undoing it because, Tony Stark's still going to be dead.
Yeah.
Chris Evans is still going to be retired as Captain America, but these are going to be like variants in a sense. Like Chris Evans coming back isn't him coming back as Captain America, although he probably is going to end up in the suit anyways. But it's not. I don't think it's ruining his ending like everyone says it is, because he's still getting the same ending he had. Same thing with Tony Stark. Like he's gonna be Doctor Doom. He's not gonna be Iron Man. So that I get why people feel that way, and the problem is it's the attachment to the actors and not the characters.
Yeah. And a big concern that I have is the thing with No Way Home was that you were able to kind of contain that into one story where it's just Spider-Man and you bring in other
Yeah,
variants from previous Spider-Man and you had Doctor Strange there, sure, whatever, right? He was basically sidelined the entire movie. The problem that I have, the concern, not the problem, you're going to do essentially, this is going to be No Way Home, but it's going to be with
yeah,
every single character from the history of all of the Marvel movies.
yeah,
And you have to try and put all of that into one plot in one movie and with no build up to Doom to understand anything about Doom. We don't know anything. We have gotten nothing from this, from any of the Dooms that might appear. We don't understand what
yeah.
the story is going to be. And the problem is, how are they going to put all of that into one film? Because Doom will have to be the main character. He has to be the main
Yeah.
character. And
It's gonna end up being like a 3 hour movie. It's gonna be a long one.
I know, but I don't know how much I think the problem too is that I've lost so much favor with the MCU where I've seen how badly they fucked everything up since like post Endgame where I don't
Yeah,
necessarily trust it. And I do believe that contrary because they did say we're not going to reset anything. I think you're right. There will be a soft reboot. I think they have to
yeah.
at this stage,
You
especially if
you
you're taking
can't.
all these characters from different timelines in. There has to be.
Yeah, you can't do Secret Wars without doing a soft reset.
Yeah.
You just can't. And I think it's the perfect time to like introduce some new actors as the characters. The problem I think we've run into with the MCU, our issue is going to be is, like I said, the attachment to the actors and not the characters. We're probably going to get a new Iron Man, and people are going to be like, "That's not RDJ, so I'm not going to watch that." I think that's unfortunately the thing with doing movies compared to comic books is eventually you're going to have to replace the actors playing the character. But fans watching movies, they form attachment to the actors. They don't want to see anyone else playing that character. I mean, it's kind of worked for. I'll use James Bond as an example. It's always been like a different James Bond every so many movies.
Or Doctor Who.
We've grown, yeah, Doctor Who. We've grown to accept things like that. We haven't really experienced that much with, other than like Batman's had so many different iterations. Some people love some of them, some people hate some of them. Spider-Man, he's had his different actors. I know Andrew Garfield was originally trashed as Spider-Man, but as people got older, they grew to accept, like you said, he was a great Spider-Man,
Yeah.
not a great Peter Parker.
No.
So, it's things like that. Like, I think that's what's going to be the hard step moving forward in the MCU now is getting new actors in as those characters. Like, I know, Captain America got his perfect ending, Iron Man in a sense got his perfect ending. It's sad, but now you can introduce new actors as those characters and move forward. I think that's what the MCU is going to struggle with is they're going to have to introduce new actors as these characters because you can't have a Marvel universe without, Captain America. He's always been like, even though I won't put him on my Mount Rushmore, he's an important part of Marvel Comics. Iron Man, while once again not on my Mount Rushmore, like he's an important part of the Marvel Comics. Like he's a billionaire. Like he's one of the funders of so many different things in the Marvel Comics. Like you can't continue to have a Marvel universe without two of those backbones of Marvel.
I would kind of argue to the contrary. I believe that they had opportunities to move forward, and obviously they're trying to do that with Sam Wilson being Captain America, as they've done in the comics. I think they
Yeah.
missed the boat with Iron Man, and the reason is, like I said, the kid that was in Iron Man 3 should have taken the mantle. It should not have been Ironheart. And
One of the most wasted cameos ever. Sorry to interrupt you, but that is one
no,
of the most wasted cameo. Most people are like, "Who is that kid?"
yeah.
And you had to wait for an article to come out. Oh, that's the kid from Iron Man 3.
I knew as soon as I saw him when I was in the theater, I knew that was him just because of, the way that the time was in the timeline. And not knowing who the guy was, but he's there with his mom in there, which you didn't get to
Yeah.
see here in Iron Man 3. But that was a huge waste. I think that's where the boat kind of sailed. But I think you can do the MCU without those characters, but you have to introduce characters that have greater or equal value to those into the main universe.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is they haven't done that. And largely because, like, if you were to put the Fantastic Four into the main universe where that's where they were, right? Fantastic Four can be a big part of the main universe. If you want to take
Yes.
in different characters like the X-Men can lead the MCU. The
Oh yeah.
problem is they have tried, because prior to getting the rights to all of this stuff, they had written, well, we're going to try and move on to these secondary characters. The only character that I
Yeah.
believe they should have recast should have been Black Panther, T'Challa. I think they should have recast
I
him.
agree with that.
I like
Like,
Shuri,
don't get me wrong. Yeah.
but I
I love
think
Chadwick Boseman, and it was
yes,
sad, but it was that Black Panther 2 movie was it wasn't a black it was a tribute to Chadwick. That's what it was.
I enjoyed Namor in that. I like the changes they made to
Oh,
Namor.
I did too.
Um,
I thought it was a good movie, but I just thought it was more of a tribute movie than a MCU movie.
yeah, I think, and for my point here, I would say that because of his passing, the character should have been recast. However, the characters like Captain America or Iron Man have finality in the main MCU. And I think that number one, I agree. I don't like Captain America coming back for Doomsday. I don't even care if it's a variant. I don't want to see RDJ or Chris Evans because they had finality to the characters, and that's the problem. To me, is like if you're going, and to a degree, Wolverine too. I had an issue with him. I like him being in Deadpool. I love the movie, but there was
Oh
finality
yeah.
in Logan, and it's one of the best Marvel movies ever. So
Yeah.
then taking that away, and then, oh well, here's a variant. Here we go. Let's redo this. Let's go. To me, there's an issue with that. But I genuinely believe you could have an MCU that incorporates actual different characters and leads the MCU in a way. You can still do the Avengers. You just have to
Yeah.
choose the right characters to do it, and I think that Marvel has failed to do that. And that's why they're
And
having issues.
And I think that's been the one of my biggest issues is they didn't have the rights to so many characters when the MCU started. And I think as it's gone on further, we've seen that become an issue. Like they didn't have a right to the characters, so they couldn't move this direction because, Fantastic Four, a huge part of the Marvel comics.
Yeah.
They couldn't move that direction. The X-Men, huge. House of M was a huge storyline. All the stuff with there's so many X-Men storyline. Like I said, the Dark Phoenix saga. Like there's
Yeah.
so many huge X-Men comics, and it's like they didn't have the rights to the characters. So the MCU is trying to figure out how can we do these stories without these cornerstone characters, and then they finally got the rights. And that's why I'm happy they're moving towards this direction with Secret Wars, because I think that's how they bridge the gap and do a soft reboot. I don't want them to do it to where like, oh yeah, by the way, these guys were in the universe the whole time. You just never seen them. If they do that shit,
Yeah.
it'll piss me
It
off.
wouldn't make
You have
sense.
you have to do a soft reboot. Like,
And that would
I know people.
that would be again the burden of having people in the universe and not explaining why they weren't involved with any of the events. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you got to do a soft reboot at this point. I know they want to like be like, oh no, we're the MCU, yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to swallow the pride on that one. You got to do a soft reboot. Like I said, recasting characters is it's gonna happen. how they go about it, that's what I'm intrigued to see. Because I mean, you could do it where you do like these succession characters, because you know there's plenty of them in the comics,
Yeah.
but they're usually never as big as the main character. I mean, you have a few examples where like arguably Miles Morales is bigger than actual Spider-Man now.
I think that's
You can,
recency bias, though. I still think Peter is
yeah.
bigger, but because of the
I mean,
recent
yeah,
success of the character and other outlets besides comics, yeah.
yeah. Which I'm not saying he is the Spider-Man, but you know, he's one of those characters where he succeeded, where it's like it's a successor that you could have to Spider-Man where he succeeded. A lot of them, like even like I think we talked about the Ironheart comics before, like they had a good start, but they just didn't have a direction for the characters. So the comic Iron Man successor didn't really blow up, you know.
Yeah.
Wolverine's had X-23 where she's had her runs where she's been popular, and then once again writing. So it's like, how do you move on from Wolverine to X-23? You know, there's a lot of that stuff where I think they've had so many cornerstone characters that they've been writing about for 50, 60 years, and they just don't know how to write newer Like that's even a problem for the comics is they don't know how to write these newer characters that take over for the older ones. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Like there's been very few characters in comics that stay dead. I think the original Captain Marvel stayed dead,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
you know, Miss Marvel became Captain Marvel. That was one of the examples of a success story. You know, it just doesn't happen often. And I don't think comics have figured out a way to do that properly without it being like an alternate storyline.
Blue Beetle is one of the examples that they actually made it work, where they brought it onto
Yes.
Jaime and he became the more popular version of the character. Um,
Yeah.
again, I think I am not in favor of them recasting those characters like Captain America. And I have to ask you, well, then what do you think they'll do with Sam Wilson if they're going to recast Captain America?
It's another thing. It's like, what? That's a great question. I personally think they should have gone with Bucky becoming Captain America
I
first.
agree, but I also think if they were going to go with Falcon, they should have given him the serum. That's just me.
I disagree with that just because, you know, in the comics he didn't take the serum. I don't think he did at least.
No, I don't
But
think so either.
I'm kind of a fan because you know Captain America is an inspirational character, and I think that's part of what made like I enjoyed the Captain America, the most recent movie. Like I enjoyed it. I don't think it was a great movie, but I enjoyed it.
It did a disservice because when you're talking about him going up against the Red Hulk, it does
Yeah,
not make sense, especially without the serum. It doesn't make
yeah,
sense that he's even in a position to win that fight. But again, power scaling, right? There's an issue
yeah.
with power scaling in the MCU and in most
I think
comics.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard too because every writer basically controls that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing to do as well. Here's what I'll say. This is like a brand new Red Hulk, so it's the first time he really hulked out. So that's the only excuse like I could like make for it is it's his first time hulking out. It's not a plausible excuse. I know it's laughable, but that's what I say in my mind. But I like that Sam Wilson didn't take the serum because it makes him more inspirational. Like the speeches that he gave, and I know the TV show wasn't well received, but like the speeches he gave in his TV show, like they were like moving speeches, and I think that's what made it powerful is because he didn't take that serum. He's just a man that was given a mantle by Steve Rogers to be the new Captain America. And I think that's what makes him a good Captain America. Like I've liked him as Captain America. I know he doesn't have the powers or everything, but he's like more of that inspirational, like he never gives up kind of thing.
Yeah, I know that he becomes Captain America in the comics, and I know that's what they were going for. Again, I believe that it should have been Bucky too. I think that they should
Yeah,
have
I
leaned
agree.
into that, especially because in the MCU, he was way more imperative to Captain America's character, to Steve Rogers' character. As much as,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously Sam Wilson is there, right? He's a side character. Bucky is like his boyfriend, dude. Like he's attached at the hip to the character of Bucky. Hence Civil War. Hence the events of everything that leads up with Captain America, The Winter Soldier, one of the most well-received Captain America movies. So to me,
Yeah.
not going in that direction, okay, I understand it. You want to lean into the comic, you want to give some representation. I understand.
Yeah.
I think the problem is the way that they launched the character of Sam Wilson. They had good elements in the Captain America Winter Soldier show. They had good elements to it. I think that they did a disservice to John Walker because they didn't make him. John Walker is not the villain in that show. And he gets a redemption at the end. He doesn't need a redemption. To me, he's the most sane person in that show because he's trying to stop the terrorists and they're like, don't kill the terrorists. He's a soldier. His goal is to kill these people. And then his partner gets executed. I don't have a problem with them killing the person. I don't.
I have very mixed feelings about like John Walker as a whole, and I think a lot of my issues are a writing thing.
Yeah.
I don't think he was written very well. I don't think he was planned out very well.
I agree with the planning out. I think he was written well. I just think that the story itself did not make sense.
I think, well, didn't they do Captain America when the whole strike happened and that kind of messed with the entire series?
It might have been, yeah.
I think that was when the strike happened. I think that kind of affected some of that MCU, that kind of stage for the Captain America TV show. It's John Walker. I think he definitely got like. I know you haven't watched Thunderbolts, but he was pretty good in that.
Yeah, people
gave
liked
him
him.
More backstory.
People liked his character, and again, we can talk about maybe the writer's strike had an issue with it, but with Captain America and the Winter Soldier, you also had the issue of these guys are trying to not, instead of stopping the flag smashers, they're like, oh well, they're lenient on the guys who are blowing people up. And that to me was a problem because the little girl bombed the building full of innocent people. And then Sam Wilson is like, oh, well, these guys are all right. And then John Walker, of course, has to suffer because his partner, his Bucky, gets executed. And then to me, it was a valid crash out. But I think that they did a disservice to the character in the launch for Sam Wilson being the new Captain America. And then the movie didn't do him any favors either with Red Hulk. I think that whole situation just doesn't make sense for the character. And of course, people didn't receive it well as a result because people are like, why are you putting Red Hulk? First of all, why is Red Hulk in a Captain America movie? Number one.
Why is he Harrison Ford?
Well, they changed the actor, right, for General Ross.
Yeah.
Because it used to be the other guy, yeah.
That's another thing. I'm like, why would you introduce Harrison Ford, someone who is also a older actor?
Yeah.
Get it. I get General Ross as an older actor, yada, yada, yada. But why do you introduce him as Red Hulk? Like, because Red Hulk, I mean, he has some important storylines going further into, Marvel Comics. And now you have this older actor who, I won't say he's going to die soon, but, he's up there in age. Like, it's a lot of this stuff planning wise, I feel like they've done things as cash grabs.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Like, don't get me wrong, like I've liked Anthony Mackie as Captain America. I think he's done a good job with it. I just think they've tried leaning too hard into what he brings to the table. And like, he is that inspirational factor. And I think they're trying to lead too hard into that. Like he was so unsure of himself in the movie. Like he didn't feel like he should be Captain America.
Well, in the show too.
Yeah, like they had already visited that in the show. I think he should evolve past that, which I think that's why they used the Hulk as a villain. They're like, all right, we're trying to prove that you should be Captain America. Like this is your proof, which I don't think they should have used a villain at that caliber to do something like that.
And that's the thing is with the show and him, because the ending of the show is him embracing the role of Captain America. That is the whole plot line of the show. That's when he visits the other super soldier that was, past the side, and he's giving his side, and then he believes in him.
Isaiah Bradley? Didn't that continue in the movie as well? Yeah.
I didn't even really watch the movie, to be honest with you. I didn't watch it. I had strong opinions of it because I just didn't think that it was going to be good. And the reason I didn't think it was going to be good is specifically because of the way that they established Red Hulk in setting that up to be his main villain. And also at the time I was disenfranchised with the MCU because it was dog shit. Everything that was coming out was terrible at the time for the most part.
they didn't handle the leader well at all.
Yeah. I remember hearing
We won't
about
even
it. Yeah.
we won't even talk about that plot line. That was handled very horribly. It's definitely a setup for the future he was, but like in a Captain America movie.
You know what is we have a big issue with villains in these movies, in individual
Yes.
movies, because there are very few heroes that have rogue galleries that can be converted well into live action.
Yep.
And obviously we talk about like Spider-Man or Batman. Those are the two, like the golden, you can put any of those villains into the movies and it's going to be successful. But a lot of these
Yeah.
characters that became popular in the MCU, like we're leaning on Avengers level threats to be the villains of these things. And then we have like MODOK and Ant-Man, which is like, what the fuck was that? How did we
Yeah.
waste MODOK
Well,
like
that's
that?
just like we were talking about this, like the wasting of the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Like he is such a big villain in the comics, and he's a good villain. And we wasted him in two of the three Iron Man movies. We semi wasted him in the Shang-Chi movie.
Yep.
I'm just like, how do we do like the Mandarin was so important, and we just do this with him? Like they really dropped like you said, like we have a you can't do a lot of the villains for the comics on the screens because they just usually aren't big. It's a week to week character. Like, oh, who's the character of the week that we're gonna beat? A lot of your Marvel villains that are bigger is when you had the events, which I think that's partially why they've set up the MCU the way it is just because like you said, and like I said, your bigger villains are the ones that are really the ones we focus on. So it's like we do these solo movies. I've told you this before. I don't think any of the Iron Man movies outside of the first one were good,
I
but
still love Iron Man 3. But
RDJ was just so charismatic as Iron Man. That's why those movies succeeded.
yeah.
Captain America's honestly had the best trilogy. His first movie's kind of weak. I mean, Winter Soldier was great, and then you have Civil War, which, like you said, that was
Is an
basically just
Avengers
an
movie.
Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Like it's hard because like you're using other characters to carry basically what these characters are because you can't do week to week villains in a movie. And eventually that bit the MCU in the ass is because they can't do that anymore. They're like, how do we make this villains someone that's threatening? Like Killmonger was one of the few successes. Like Killmonger was a good villain. He was someone that wasn't bigger in the comics.
Yeah.
At least I've never really read Black Panther comics. I won't lie. I know about Black Panther and all that. Yeah, you got the shirt on.
Yeah.
But Killmonger wasn't a bigger villain, but they made it work for the movie. A lot of the movies haven't been able to figure out how to make their villains work. Like Iron Man had some of the worst villains.
Absolutely true.
Like,
And I can see that for
oh,
Iron Man 3. I didn't like the villain for Iron Man 3. I just
oh
like
yeah,
I like the character perspective of Tony Stark. I
yeah,
like that they gave him an opportunity to shine outside of the armor. Which they
and
do that in the animated shows too, where they show him in
yeah.
situations where he has to deal without the armor. There's one where he's in what is it? The Antarctica, the fucking where the jungle guy is. I forget what the name of it is. You know what I'm talking about? Where the
Oh,
dinosaurs are?
Kazar,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
in
like
the Savage Land.
Savage Lands, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Yeah. They have that in the animated show. I think it's in or it's Mightiest Heroes, where they have him in a situation where he's stripped basically to nothing. And he's in the Savage Lands and he figures out a way to survive and escape. Those are the
Yeah,
things that I like about because we get so much Iron Man. We got so much Iron Man, but we didn't get Tony Stark until that to me was 3 where we really got and then
yeah,
of course with the whiplash moments like when he's walking out and I talked to you about this where the kid draws him the picture and then he has PTSD and a
yeah,
panic attack. Those are the moments that I like about these characters and I think you can do in solo movies. But going back to the villain thing, yeah, the villain in 3 wasn't very good or in 2. Whiplash was like
yeah,
whatever. And they did,
yeah.
who they wasted was Hammer. They wasted him. He was a
Yep.
joke character, but he's a
Yeah,
big
they've
part of the Iron Man comics.
yeah. They haven't done a good job with the villains, and that's where Thanos succeeded. Like Thanos in the comics is not what he is in the movies.
No, he
But
just has a
they
boner for
wrote him
Lady Death.
yeah, they wrote him so well. Like Marvel's done their best is when they found a way to make you not choose the side of the villain, but understand where they're coming from. That's why Killmonger succeeded, because you could see where he was coming from. You've seen why he had the anger he had. Thanos, you could kind of see where he's coming from. Overpopulation, stuff like that. So like when you're able to see the villain side of things, that's when their villains are the best.
Hmm.
Because you can't write them the way you write them in comics. That's just the unfortunate truth. You can't write a villain the same way. And that's the issue with the MCU is anytime they have a villain, they kind of just try to make him, oh, the big bad, that the face off at the end. They do it for a fight, a fighting sequence, fighting action. They do it for that. They don't do it to really build depth. Thor's villains. I can't even name a Thor villain.
Hela was the best of all of them.
Oh, hella, yeah.
Yeah.
And they made her semi-relatable.
Yeah,
That's the
because
thing,
she was
like,
cast away by Odin. Yeah, and you can understand that.
yeah. So it's like their villains are bad when they're just putting them in there so you can have a fight sequence between them. Um, Thor movies have been. I don't even want to talk about Thor movies. We're gonna forget that Thor movies exist.
See, the problem that I have, Thor was assassinated because of Taika Waititi, and I as much as I enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, that was not a Thor movie. They turned him into a Guardians character from James Gunn's Guardians. That's what he
Yeah.
did. They ruined the thing that the best phase was phase 1 for me. I don't, even talking about like the introduction of Guardians and the introduction or like the Infinity War Endgame saga, whatever. Phase 1 was where you had distinct characters. They were not written the same. They did not behave the same as everybody else, where they're just quipping and laughing and joking around all the time. There's nothing serious about any of the characters anymore, which is really frustrating. But in phase 1, Captain America was very distinct. Tony Stark was very distinct. Thor was
Yeah.
Thor. You know what I mean? Like, the interaction, and Hulk was terrifying. Hulk was a scary threat. He was the main threat outside of Loki because everybody was scared he was going to go off at any moment. That's when they
Yeah.
understood that you can have distinct characters. And that's the thing. Thor he was assassinated. And man, did they destroy him in Endgame and in Infinity
Oh, yeah.
War. They ruined
Yeah.
Thor and they ruined Hulk. They ruined those characters.
Yeah. I would say Infinity Game not as much. I can definitely see where you're coming from. That was like the most Thor we've had in
True.
a while. Like he was, we saw how powerful he is when he was forging the hammer and everything.
I'm thinking more Endgame. I misplaced.
Yeah, Endgame, like Fat Thor was dumb. I was cool to see him as more of like what a Norse god would actually look like.
Yeah.
That was the only cool aspect. But yeah, they butchered Thor's character. I get it in a sense because it's hard to write super OP characters. That's kind of what Thor is. That's kind of what Hulk is. When like you said, it's a writing thing. When you have so many of those characters, it's like, well, why can't these two characters just take down this character?
Yeah.
And that was kind of a lot of people's complaint with Hulk and Thanos, which I mean, that whole thing was messed
That
up
was
anyway. It was
stupid.
like, how did Thanos just body Hulk?
Without all
I
the
get where
gems,
people are.
all the stones.
I mean, didn't he have the Power Stone though?
I think so. He was missing 3,
That-
right? He was missing 3
Yeah,
stones.
he was missing 3. He was missing the time, the reality, and the soul.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, he had the Power Stone. So that, in a sense, made sense why he was able to beat the Hulk the way he did. I get why people are angry about it. Trust me.
But
I definitely
but
get
for
it. I
Hulk
thought
to
it was
not
dumb.
come back is the big issue.
That was the
people
dumb
had.
part. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
They basically watered down the Hulk. I mean, they've done the whole combining of them and, him being like Smart Hulk now where he still has power and he still has the brains.
Waste of a character. It's just a
Yeah,
terrible
it's been
waste
cool.
of a character.
It's been kind of cool to see. Like it's like interesting seeing how he's been played out. I don't like it personally. Like you said, I think the Hulk should be the intimidating character. I get why they did it for the MCU.
And they
Like,
wasted Planet
trust-
Hulk too. They wasted Planet Hulk in Thor Ragnarok. They just
That, once
completely
again, that's-
butchered it.
That's a rights issue.
I
I
know.
think that's been one of the biggest things with the Hulk
Yeah.
is the rights issue. I think that's why he's been written the way he has is because of the rights. Once again, that's one thing that bothers me about the MCU is like how do you start something up like this and not have the rights to like 75% of your characters?
Well,
So like I think for the Guardians movie for Ego the Living Planet, they had to make like an actual trade to even use him. And I don't remember what it was. That's why Namor took so long to get introduced was because of
yeah.
the whole rights issue and everything. So yeah, I think that's part of why the Hulk has been written the way he has. Like you said, ruining the Planet Hulk, ruining the chance to even have like some type of Illuminati be a part in that decision as well kind of bothered me.
And
I don't,
the multiverse of madness for me, I enjoyed the movie. I think people took the Illuminati that was in that universe, and because of the way that they were taken down by Scarlet Witch, which I think is justifiable because of how powerful she actually is as a
I
character,
agree.
I just think the way that they introduced the Illuminati and then threw them away was not great. And
Yeah.
because they are, again, so important to the universe and the comics.
Yeah.
So, and that again, all of these concepts, all of these characters, all of the villains that we've introduced that haven't panned out or been successful or been received well, the question is, how are they going to move forward? Because we're running out of villains that aren't Spider-Man villains that are going to be put on the
Yeah.
MCU screen. You know, we still haven't gotten Mephisto. Oh, we did get Mephisto, but it's Sacha Baron Cohen, which I just don't like Borat being in a throwaway show. Oh God, it drives me crazy. Why would you introduce him in Ironheart? That
Yeah.
people didn't
And
receive
that's what,
Ironheart well in the second Black Panther movie. And then you put one of the most important characters in there. Dormammu was a fucking cloud in Doctor Strange. You're
that's why I
throwing
think
him
this, like,
away.
I really think it's important that they do a soft reboot. That way you can reintroduce these villains and stuff as they should be. They had the rights to basically most of the characters now.
And now you
They
have
can
the X-Men villains and Fantastic Four
yes,
villains. Yeah.
which is very important. So they can redo some stuff now, and that's why I think Secret Wars is going to be such an important movie. I just hope it's handled right to where they can do a reboot and fans accept it. Because obviously, doing a reboot, there's going to be fans that just like anything that happens after this reboot doesn't exist. It's going to happen. It happened with the Snyderverse fans. Why are you a fan of that universe? We're not going to talk about that. That'll be a different podcast.
I could go on for hours about fucking Snyderverse fans.
But,
Jesus.
it's going to be the same thing. People are going to not accept it. They're going to boo it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate part is you're gonna have that. But this reboot that hopefully they're heading towards is so crucial. Because then you can reintroduce characters like Kang. You can redo it. I mean, you can bring Thanos back because he's always going to be a threat. Like I don't think Thanos can stay dead in the MCU. I know it's going to be a large task to bring him back, but you can't. Thanos is like one of those villains that just doesn't go away.
I think the
And
thing
I think it's
is, there's going to be a certain period of time before you can reintroduce some of the villains or characters. He's one of those
and
characters that
yeah,
maybe a decade, if the MCU is still going a decade down the line, maybe you can bring him back in some capacity after the
yes.
reboot. But you can't just bring back Thanos right away because that would be a terrible move. You've already done
Oh
his
yeah, I
story
agree.
and you just completed it. So then to bring him back right away. But yeah, I think what you're
Yeah,
saying, you have to rip the band-aid off. Regardless of what the reception is going
yeah,
to be from fans at the immediate moment, there are people who absolutely love fucking Ironheart, which is a terrible show. There are people who love these horrible shows and horrible movies. You just have to deal with it because the vast
yeah.
people are not receiving things well from Marvel right now. So you have to rip the band-aid off. You have to do what you have to do to put yourself in a position to, first of all, what they have to do when they do this reset, there has to be a timeline planned out in the same way that the Thanos saga, the Infinity Saga was. You
Yeah.
cannot go into it the same way that you did post Endgame. You can't. Because you're just going to run into the same problem again, and people aren't going to keep playing games with you.
Yeah. Well, see that's like you said, they had it planned. Like they had like this soft plan where we're just gonna do a bunch of multiverse stuff, and that works if you do it right. Their plan didn't work because they did like they did Eternals and they did like Doctor Strange, and they're just jumping around, and you're not getting that cohesive story. They're just trying to introduce characters.
and I get why they're doing it because that's how they did the first phase. We got Captain America, we got Thor, we got Iron Man. Like they're introducing these characters, and each phase they introduce characters. But what they did differently was they did sequels to the characters' movies, and obviously every phase basically ended with an Avengers movie. Everything kind of led up to that, which is what they tried doing with this multiverse. But I think another thing that kind of really messed things up was the whole situation with Jonathan Majors as King.
Yeah, and obviously he ended up getting proven that that stuff didn't happen, with his offset
Yeah.
stuff. And I was very disappointed, especially with Michael B. Jordan and how he threw him under the bus and then went back and like said, "Oh, well, I support you, buddy," after all of it was conceded that he didn't do those things.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand wanting to push away from that and, that off-screen situation. But even on screen, they didn't handle him well. Loki is the only thing that handled him well.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's what really did it too. Because that was they built a whole plan. Like we were supposed to have two Kang movies coming out, and now it's two Doctor Doom movies. They've never had to do that switch before, and I think that was the huge issue was like this whole thing was planned around Kang.
yeah,
And then the whole fallout with Jonathan Majors. I think that's what's really messed up this phase. Not that the stuff they were doing before that was good anyways,
yeah.
but I think it messed up their end game plan. That's why they had to swivel to Doom.
Yeah, I think the problem is when his first movie introduction is Ant-Man Quantumania, and Ant-Man has not been well received at all, especially I mean, they made him a joke of a character too. You want to talk about character assassination. Ant-Man is a fucking
Yeah.
waste in the MCU. He is a joke. And that's not how he's
I
supposed to be.
I get them not wanting to go with Hank Pym right away. Like I get it. There's a lot of controversy around Hank Pym,
Yeah.
but he is also so important to a lot of like Ultron was made by Hank Pym. Like there's so much Hank Pym stuff. I mean, you could completely skip over the him abusing Wasp and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That should have never been written in a comic for a character of that caliber. I get they're trying to like humanize characters and saying, yeah, they make mistakes.
Well, and
But
that's the
Hank
thing.
Pym is
Doing adaptations, you don't have to adapt certain aspects of the
exactly.
character.
You
So,
can get yeah, you can get rid of that,
yeah.
which they easily could have done. Instead, they just made him like an older guy. And now it's like, oh yeah, by the way, Hank Pym was around in this time and he was the Ant-Man then, so we've always had heroes in the MCU. When Iron Man started off, it was like, like he is the only hero that ever existed.
Yep.
So it's like they're having to rewrite. I think that's another issue too, is like the more established they get, they have to go back in the past and be like, oh well, this existed, and that's another reason that I just think they should not a full reboot, but definitely a soft reboot because there's been so much stuff that has happened off the screens. Obviously, we talked about rights issues. All that stuff has kind of been ironed out at this point. And we can kind of move past some, like the Kang stuff. We can revisit the Kang stuff somewhere down the line. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it comes to.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Doomsday, and I think the big test first of all is going to be how Brand New Day does. I think that's going to be very
Yeah.
important in moving forward with the rest of I mean, obviously Doomsday is set in stone. We know that Doomsday is happening. They're not going to they might do reshoots or whatever, but I think like you were saying
Oh,
before, it's not going to break them if Doomsday fails. However,
Yes.
if it is a flop, there are going to be some serious questions moving forward of how they proceed. It won't flop financially, but in terms of putting
Yeah.
together a universe that is cohesive again, if it doesn't work out, I don't know how you move forward. So,
Well, I believe I seen the other day that they're actually already starting to film Secret Wars, which is interesting because that usually doesn't happen until after the next movie comes out. So it's like I wonder if they're trying to do this just to prepare for it to flop and to have that least movie. Like I don't know why they're starting that. Like that I know it's the movie comes out next year and obviously filming and everything, but like to start it before you even dropped a real trailer for Doomsday is kind of an interesting strategy. I wonder what's happening behind the scenes for them to do that.
I mean, Infinity War and Endgame was like that too. But
Yeah.
the thing is, they were really just part 1 and part 2 of the same movie. But they were already doing shoots with Infinity War. Granted, the trailers had been dropped.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I could see that. Because Secret Wars is going to be... I wouldn't be surprised if it's part 1 and part 2 with Doomsday. It's going to be very similar in that sense, I would assume.
Yeah. That's what I'm assuming. Because wasn't Avengers like Infinity War and Endgame tip originally Endgame was supposed to be Infinity War 2, wasn't it? Wasn't that the original working
That
title?
was the working title, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because that was the original. And now they've done it separately. Like they had these next two Avengers movies planned out, but it's Doomsday and then Secret Wars. So it's like they've done things a little differently, and maybe it is supposed to be like a sequel type thing. I think it'd make the most sense for it.
I think so, too.
It's just I wonder how they're gonna pull this off. Like I said, soft reboot, hopefully. I know not everyone's gonna embrace that, but at this point, you really have to.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. But it's been about 2 hours and I gotta pee. You want to
All
wrap
right.
it up?
Yep.
Yeah, well, that was fun. I mean, it flew by. The 2 hours flew by for that.
Oh yeah.
And we covered some
I'm gonna
good
walk inside.
ground.
My kids are gonna be awake.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll have to revisit and then talk about what ends up happening with the boys because we talked about that a lot. And then just
Yep.
moving forward. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to more Marvel content coming out. So, and
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see how they handle Brand New Day. I am nervous. I've told you I'm nervous about that, and I'm nervous about
Yeah.
Doomsday. But we'll see. It's all coming up in due time. So,
Yes, it is.
all right.
We'll definitely be having some podcasts about that. But yep, this your boy Feedat.
Fizz Bloodhound. Thank you all for watching.
I will see you next podcast video.
Oh yeah.